This episode of the podcast is brought to you by 88 Frames Media. From website development, podcast creation and editing, videography, and more, 88 Frames Media has you covered. Visit 88 Frames Media for more information. That's 88framesmedia.com.
I don't mind like going for the day and like petting the cows and hugging the chickens, but that like a manual labor vacation doesn't seem like the best use of my vacation time.
Well, it's labor intensive too. It's like do you have a function? Is there a real value to having a horse?
I mean,
I don't think so.
yeah, so unless you're racing it to bet on it or you ride for recreation and you live somewhere you could do that, there really doesn't seem to be much purpose to.
No. Unless you're in the glue making industry.
Even if you really wow, dark. Very dark. Well, on that note,
Let's do it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sanctum Sanctorum podcast, where comics and Christ culture collide. I am one of your hosts, Joey.
and I'm Chris.
We are super glad that you have joined us now for episode 4. We are covering Wonder Woman 84. Oh, I just realized that. The 4 on episode 4.
Hey.
Cosmic. Look at us go.
Hey, look at that. And it's 2024. So this movie takes place.
Oh, my
well, 40
God.
40 years ago would be when this takes place, right? If I mathed right.
The stars align. Which, by the way, did you see the comet when it was happening?
Did I see the comment when...
Not comment. Comet.
Oh, the comet. No, I did not.
Yeah. Okay. I saw it twice. I'll actually throw a photo up right here. It was really cool.
Oh, that's cool. Did you see the Northern Lights when they showed up over here?
Those I didn't see. No, have you?
I saw a photo that a friend took. She texted me and said, hey, you should come outside. The Northern Lights are happening. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, yeah, I should do that. And then I got distracted and I never made it.
I love how you're we're comparing, did you see this firsthand? And you asked me, like, did you see it? And I was like, no. And you're like, I saw a photo of it.
Yeah. Well, it's like saying, did you ever meet this celebrity? No. Yeah, me neither. But I've seen a picture of them and
either.
They look great.
But man, that interview was great. Anyway, like we said, we're covering Wonder Woman 84 today, and we've got a lot of thoughts on it. We're super pumped to discuss it.
Oh,
but
yes.
Before we dive into it, we've got a cultural comic moment that we have to discuss, and that is the evolution of the female superhero.
Ooh.
And not just within the comic realm, but also the film realm. They have evolved from sort of this side character or distress to this dang, she's kicking brass aspect. Like, they've really come into their own, particularly where it comes into the MCU and the DCEU, just female heroes in general. From these side characters to these empowered central figures. And I'd love to have a conversation, Chris. I recognize that our perspective is limited, being males, but how has the perception of women within pop culture been influencing the art that we're creating, but also responding to what's happening within culture? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that, for a long time, speaking of, since we're covering Wonder Woman today, Wonder Woman has been around almost as long as Batman and Superman, in regards to World War II propaganda and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But even still, even though she was portrayed as a strong female character, there were still aspects, especially when she joined the Justice League, of like the men are going out to do battle or to patrol or whatever, and she makes sure that the Hall of Justice is nice and tidy. for when they get back. And there are like comic book panels of weird conversations like that. And I think that
That's so funny.
it's crazy when you read that now. That's how they, like, you created one of the strongest women in fiction, and that's how we're treating her. Like, that seems
But she's
ridiculous.
got to vacuum the living room.
But I think that especially, I mean, at least for me, when I really started consuming pop culture, it was in the 90s. And I think that was when I really started to notice these very strong female-centric TV shows and films and in comics as well. You know, you saw the evolution of, you saw television characters like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, some of the characters from the show Firefly, Star Trek. You know, they had all of these very strong female-centric stories that I thought were really great. But I think now you see it where women have really taken the forefront in a lot of these stories, and they've gone from being side characters to the main protagonist or the main antagonist. And I think that is a reflection of how people want to see their female characters and how they should see them, because women should be able to look and be able to see themselves as much as men do.
Right. Is that a chicken or the egg scenario where it's like culture is mimicking art, or is art influencing culture?
But probably a little bit of both end.
I was going to say, yeah, I think it's both. I think the ability to see ourselves portrayed how we want and how we aspire to be definitely plays a role. But it also, like, you couldn't have made, I don't know, 3 come to mind. I'm sure there's more. But you couldn't have made 3 female-centric comic book films with these billion-dollar budgets 20 years ago. You just wouldn't have done that, because they would have segregated them to TV shows. They would have said, no, nobody wants to see female leads. And our culture has massively shifted in that regard. And so now they do get top billing. And I recognize that there is still a disparity between the male and the female superheroes, the pay gap and all of that. But as far as at least acknowledgement and recognition and an effort, there is a momentum in that direction in a way that does reflect the culture that we live in. I mean, for crying out loud, we've got a female vice president in this country. Yeah. So progress is clearly being made. And to me, it's cool to see how one influences the other. You know, one of the things that come to mind is Samuel L. Jackson playing Nick Fury. The comic character was white until Sam Jackson portrayed that character. And now the comic book accurate version of Nick Fury looks like Samuel L. Jackson. And so that's a cool example of, like, we saw something and then we reacted to it in the art form. And I think that does and has the potential to happen and continue to happen for females in these lead roles and in these lead characters.
I will just so we don't get any comments on, I will make one quick correction that Nick Fury started as white, but in the Ultimate line of comics, he was drawn black and modeled after Sam Jackson. Like I don't know who the artist was, but they used him as the blueprint, which is why they wanted to cast him as Nick Fury. But the fact that they casted the more modern depiction of him shows a lot of progress, as opposed to, you know, the one that had been around much longer.
Right. Even though my facts are wrong, the point actually still works. That now we're modeling cultural touchstones based on the art that we've created, and then we do it vice versa.
But I do think that, you know, you're right when you say that, you know, several years ago, we would have had a hard time having these female-centric comic book movies, despite there being so many depictions of them in the comics.
Yeah.
And I also think that it wouldn't have happened without sexualizing them, where they wouldn't have just been able to be a hero. They would have had to have a love interest. They would have had to have been sexualized in some way. They would
Right.
have had to have had these aspects still, like, you know, whatever. I know that there was some disparity when it came to like the Black Widow movie, but something that I appreciated about it was that there's no love interest for her in that. She is just a super spy trying to save her family, getting revenge on this evil organization, but there's no love interest. There's nothing like that. And, it's one of the things that I think is good about, Wonder Woman, too, is like, even though there is a love interest, it's not the full focus. You know what I mean?
Sort of.
It's not, well, to me, it's not the only thing about it. It's not what defines her as a character.
In comparison to the first movie, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And that's sort of a struggle too. It's like anytime there's a female lead, it's like, well, her weakness has to be her love interest. Well, that's incredibly sexist, and it quite honestly, to me, it's lazy writing to just be like, well, you've got these chromosomes, so here's your weakness. It's like, well, write it better. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you're so emotional, therefore you're weak. Love is one of the strongest forces in the world. Let's preach for a second. Love is one of the strongest forces in the world, and it doesn't have to be relegated to this simplistic, oh, this is why you can't really kill the bad guy because you're weak. Like, no, that's not it at all. And that would never work vice versa. You would call that right out. So I agree with you. I love that this is not the main focus of it, but it also has to be on the forefront of writers, creators, and directors, that you can't just use that as the cheap weakness. Develop your characters, particularly when it comes to female leads.
But also, why does that have to be, like you said, why does that have to be the weakness? Why can't that be a motivator, but be just as strong? If the relationship or the idea of love is such a strong emotion and such an important part of our lives as people and an important part of our society, it's something that you hear from, from everywhere, how important love is and how impactful love is. Why does that have to be the thing that is viewed as a weakness? Like, why can't you be both strong and in love? Why can't you have a relationship and be this fearsome hero?
Right.
There's no reason not to. Say it again.
What's love got to do with it?
Everything. Love's got everything to do with it.
It's not a secondhand emotion.
Yeah. No.
I think that's a great point, and that's where we'll leave it. But what do you guys think? What do you think about the evolution of the female lead in culture, in comics? Drop us a comment on this video or throw us a DM on Instagram or Facebook. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Can't wait to hear all about it.
So, Chris Army Knife, we've got to talk about Wonder Woman 84. This movie came out in 2020, and I'm going to come back to that multiple times, but I have a plot synopsis that's going to knock your socks off.
I can't wait. I'm super pumped to hear it. Let's do it.
Cue the foreboding music. Here we go. Diana Prince is living her best life in the 80s, land of neon, hairspray, and shoulder pads, while pretending to be a mild-mannered museum curator. Sure, she has godlike powers, but she's keeping it low-key, only saving the world when no one's looking, which is usually when the mall's closed. Enter Maxwell Lord, a sleazy business mogul with bad hair, and Cheetah, a supervillain rocking a jungle cat aesthetic. Now Diana has to juggle saving the world, avoiding giant perms, and making sure her heroics don't clash with her 9-to-5. Diana must face the ultimate question: can she get what she wants without being a cheetah? It's just another day in the 80s in Wonder Woman 84. Dun, dun, dun.
No.
I was saving that for so long. I wanted to text it to you like every minute of every day.
Can she be a cheetah? No. And on the last episode, I really was impressed with your synopsis. And although I'm a little impressed with how you wrote it, I'm both offended by your dad joke and I don't know. I have
You
a
know
lot.
what?
I have a lot of negative emotions about this whole thing now.
I will see myself out, but oh man, that was ooh. As soon as I saw it, like I saw it in my mind and I said, you have to work that in somehow. And then it just came to me like it was Holy Spirit inspired. And then I said, am I going to deny God?
Listen, that is a false. That is a false spirit. That is the father of lies speaking to you right there.
We condemn that.
I condemn that in the name of Jesus, Wonder Woman, and all things that are good.
Don't be a cheetah. There's good stuff in this movie, Chris. I would like you to kick off your good stuff because I do have a fair amount of really, really good stuff about this movie. Which, audience, if you're not familiar, usually when we review videos at your local Blockbuster, Chris tends to be the right. We should bring it back. Let's stop this and open a Blockbuster.
There's one in the world right now, and it
Really?
is on my butt. Yeah, there's one. I forget where it is. It's far away though. It's on like the West Coast, but it's on my bucket list to go.
Ooh, let's find out where that is and go. But usually when things come out on VHS and Chris and I watch them, Chris is the DC apologist and I tend towards Marvel. And when we cover different movies, we sort of know where we're going to land. So when we fight, when we argue, it's not really like a surprise. With this one, it's actually quite surprising. It's surprising to me where I landed with this, but I want you, Christoph Maxwell Lord, to share with us where you found joy out of this film.
Well, before I jump into that, again, this is Wonder Woman 84, was directed by Patty Jenkins and written by Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns, who is, comic book royalty when it comes to writing. And it stars, of course, Gal Gadot, Pedro Pascal, Kristen Wiig, and Chris Pine. So my first good is what a stacked cast. Like those are all great actors. Maybe they didn't all work in this, but a great cast. Since we're on the subject of the cast, one thing I loved and one thing I like about him in general is Chris Pine is so charmingly funny that I just enjoy seeing him on the screen. It really doesn't matter in what. He just he's one of those guys that you could put him in the greatest movie ever made or the worst movie ever made, and it would still be like, well, he was still great to watch. So
you know what's interesting about him is anytime he's on the screen, I've seen him multiple times, whether he's Jack Ryan, whether he's Soldier in the movie The Contractor, which is phenomenal, The Outlaw King. He has such a variety and a Rolodex of roles. You always take him seriously. Mm-hmm. It's never like, oh, he's phoning it in or he doesn't believe in this 100%. And when he shows up, you're absolutely right. It's charming, but it's light, and it's like, there's a familiar face that I'm familiar with because of the last movie, but he grounds it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that he's an incredibly watchable and likable actor. And so, yeah, again, most of the good that I have is about the cast. For me, Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman. Like
she is
the way that other actors embody certain roles. She if they recast
her Iron Man,
exactly,
right? Exactly. She embodies who the character is, and not just because she's the first, because technically she's not.
Right. She's not right. It's not because she's the first, because Linda Carter was the first. Which, by the way, love the Linda Carter cameo at the end there.
That was
the little mid-credit scene. I do like that. But she will always be my Wonder Woman. And I feel like this is something we're going to disagree on, so we could jump into it a little bit if you want. But
here we go.
Kristen Wiig surprised me with how good she is. I was only really familiar with her in comedy. You got things like Bridesmaids, even the remake of Ghostbusters, Saturday Night Live. So yep. I did not expect her to play something. I mean, she had some funny moments, but I didn't really think that all right, this is going to be all right, but she's not going to play a believable villain. And I thought that her evolution into Cheetah was really good. And I thought she did a really great job.
I think she's a beautiful, smart, comedic actress. And because that's been my experience with her, it was a little hard to see her in this, particularly because she's not really a villain until the last 30 minutes of the film.
But that's why I thought it was interesting, because you saw her progress to just being a little more confident, then being a little edgy, then being like really selfish, and then being full blown villain. Like you saw this very progressive turn, and that's why I liked it.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll give you that. I think the progression and the pacing of that progression was well done. There's other things that we can talk about within the bad, but I think it's a good move to put her as the villain, right? Because you've sort of got your pool of villains, and particularly when it comes to female-led movies, you can't just have a male be the antagonist because that's its own message. You sort of need to have a female versus female aspect that she's fighting, if it's not just internal.
And I like that it was physical too.
Right. So she's the physical manifestation of the female struggle. The internal manifestation is her getting what she wants. So Cheetah does really represent that animalistic desire. I want what I want and I'm going to get it. Whether she pulled that off, and this goes to one of my bads, but we don't have to be on bad just yet, but it's a product of its time, and its time is the middle of a pandemic. So it's got a battle in and of itself. I get that you had a release date. I get that you had an idea and everything, but there are test screenings that would have happened and audience reactions that would have happened that just didn't at this time. And I think that the way we have it, is just a result of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely is something that could have played into it, but I think given the fact that it was unexpected, and what they had to, what they were working with, and how that developed, I think that she was a surprisingly great choice for this, and I thought that it should open up doors for her to take on more serious roles, more action-based roles, and that kind of thing. I think that the Dreamstone is kind of an interesting idea. I don't like the way that it was always done, but I thought that it was a really, and I know they reference it in the movie, but it was very like the monkey's paw, the story of the monkey's paw, where it was, yes, you get what you want, but it's a twisted version of it, or it costs you something dearly. So like even, Diana getting Steve Trevor back, she didn't really get him back. He was in the body of someone else.
We're going to talk about that.
Cheetah, I want to be different than, I want to be unlike anyone that's ever come before. So we're going to make her, it makes her half cheetah, half human. So I just thought it was like these really interesting, twisted versions of the wishes. I just think they could have done more with it, but I like the concept of it. I thought was really good.
Sure.
And for me, the last good thing is just a personal thing for me. I'm a sucker for the 80s. I love 80s movies. I love modern movies that are set in the 80s. And one of the things I like is that they could have very easily beat you over the head with this movie's in the 80s. And I don't feel like they did. Like you saw it in the, you had some moments like when Cheetah goes to the gym and everybody's wearing, the 80s gym clothes. When she's showing Steve Trevor the modernization of things and, watching it from now, it's like, oh yeah, that's, those are all 80s things, but it wasn't like, we're going to play every hit from the 80s and everybody's going to be wearing neon colors and everybody's hair is going to be enormous.
It was a period piece, but it wasn't Stranger Things.
Exactly. It felt good for being a superhero movie. It felt very grounded in the time period, and it wasn't like there wasn't too many, wink and a nod at things, and most of them were from Chris Pine. Especially when he does
Right.
that little fashion show. And again, I thought that was very funny and very charming. So I feel like that's how they made it work really well.
Yeah. Off of that, I had told you that there's one thing that makes this movie work for me.
Is it the fanny pack? It's the fanny pack because you want a fanny pack. I'll get you a fanny
I
pack.
so want a fanny pack. Please. Christmas is coming. It is that it's an 80s movie, but think about the 80s comic book movies.
You mean Howard the Duck and Batman? That was pretty
Howard
much
the
it.
Duck, Batman, Superman, right? Like the 70s. I had told Chris that there's one reason that this movie works for me, as opposed to me just completely taking a dump on it. And it's remembering that this is Superman 3. If you look at this movie like it's a Superman movie, everything works. Everything changes. It's no longer a bad film because it's Superman 3. Now, if you're not familiar with Superman 3, Superman 3 is where computers can do anything. It's not really about Superman. It's more about destroying like Colombian coffee fields, how computers literally can do anything we need them to do. But it's the world. It's our characters. It's not even like focused on the main character, but like with that in mind, it's less about the content of the movie and more about the vibes of the movie. With that in mind, I like it. It's actually pretty good. Because now it's not like, well, where does this fit in the DC cinematic universe? Like, how does this compare to the Marvels? How does this compare to Captain Marvel and other female leads? Like, it's got to say something. No, it's just fun. And it's not supposed to be taken seriously because it doesn't take itself seriously.
Well, that's good because I didn't take it seriously at all.
Good. That's, it's rooted in the 80s, but with that mentality, as I'm watching it, particularly in that opening mall scene, I'm like, this feels a lot like Superman. And once I shifted there, I was like, oh, it works. Now I don't need to beat it up because it's Superman.
I can't say that argument really sways me into liking it more, but I understand what you're saying. I just don't know that I can get there.
But you see what I mean, right? Like,
I see what you mean. I just don't think I can get there.
Right, and unfortunately, I don't think you need to give everybody like a pamphlet before they watch this so that they can enjoy it. For me, that was the key that unlocked it. Otherwise, I would have just hated the entire thing. Another thing that we both love that you didn't talk about, but Pedro Pascal and his father-son moments.
Oh, yeah.
Being dads,
Ooh.
I mean, it gets me every time, but like that man knows how to act, and that man is a convincing father who needs desperately to connect with his son. He does it imperfectly, and I think that's something that all dads can relate to. Like, I want to do this and I want to do right by you in this, but I'm going to fall and I'm battling my own insecurities and my selfishness and I'm going to fail completely. But also there's redemption. I think the kid says something like, I don't love you because of that. I love you because you're my dad. And I'm like, oh, all right.
Yeah, suddenly there's a little bit of dust in the air. And but like even the
like, thanks, Patty Jenkins.
even his Maxwell Lord's motivations for wanting the Dreamstone, wanting to create this legacy, isn't completely selfish, but it's also for his son. And he says that I want you to be, you're going to be, so when this is all complete, you're going to be so proud of me, and we're going to have the life we always wanted, and it's going to be amazing. So it's like you understand, like, yeah, I want to have a legacy that my son can be proud of as well. And I know you do too. And so it's like, man, I connect with that. And then seeing him at the end when the son is wandering around and the world is in chaos and he can't let go of this power that he's gotten himself. And, eventually, like, you see him, like, that's the thing that puts him over the edge, and him just like calling out his name and not knowing what to do. Like, I need to help him. What do I do? Do I let this go? Can I let this go? And it's just like, oh my God, wow. Like, I did not expect that to affect me the way that it did.
Really, really well done. And the last good thing I have is that this is a classic second movie, right? This is Superman 2. This is Spider-Man 2. This is a sophomore film in can I have what I want and be who I am? I guess not, because I lose my powers when I do. I guess I need to self-sacrifice. Classic. And I thought they did very well in that. Not as good as those other two films, but it is that narrative. And in her version of this, I think it works.
But she didn't really lose all her powers, though.
No, and she didn't learn anything, but I liked how they did it.
Like, she didn't lose, like, she lost a little bit of it, but, like, so now she can get shot and it hurts a little. Now she has to put a little extra effort into ripping the locks off of doors. But it's not like he appeared and the next day, all of a sudden, she's completely mortal and completely human. It's like, well, that.
Oh yeah, and that leads perfectly into our bad. But why don't we take a break? We'll hear a word from our sponsor, and we'll be back with all our bad stuff.
All right, we'll see you in a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Paradise Punch. Paradise Punch is a refreshing island drink created for the gods themselves. Using fresh ingredients from the heart of Themyscira, one sip will bring out your inner Amazon warrior, making you ready to win a war or win the heart of the one you love. You don't need a lasso of truth when people tell you how much they love our beverage, and once you taste it for yourself, you'll feel like you're flying on golden wings. If you wish to awaken the warrior princess within, don't waste time wondering how. Try Paradise Punch today and watch your wish come true.
Awaken the Amazon goddess inside.
I don't mess around with that.
I think that that really speaks to the heart of where a lot of our male listeners are. Like, they want to awaken the Amazon goddess inside.
Absolutely. Who doesn't want to fly on golden wings? Who doesn't want to be a warrior princess deep in their heart and soul? I've always wanted to be a warrior princess.
Thanks, Paradise Punch. We appreciate your sponsorship. And as always, not a real product.
But don't you wish it was a little bit?
Oh, 100% I wish it was.
I wish all of these were.
There's some really bad things in this movie.
I wish
really,
that wasn't
really bad things.
I wish that wasn't the case, but there are
we
some.
could have just stopped at all the good stuff, but I'm going to kick it off with some big issues here.
All right, hit me.
And I'll try to be charitable, but there's some like glaring things here. All right, so the opening scene, they're like at the Olympics. Aren't they all Amazonian? Like, aren't they all special? Isn't the thing about Diana that she's the special one? Even though she's a kid, it's sort of like, what are you guys doing?
Well, I think that's why she could compete against these women who were obviously much older than her, but she, was holding her own until she cheated.
She did cheated, and Robin Wright called her out.
Straight up, right at the end there, just pulled her right off the
choked her, right? That was sort of like, okay, you need to explain this a little bit more. It was used to make the opening point, but I feel like there was probably a more palpable way instead of like causing concern about like, why are we all competing? I don't get this.
Yeah, they didn't really explain like what they were competing for, like what was the reward, what was the honor that was bestowed. But I did think that it was kind of cool. Like, I wouldn't mind a movie about like the Amazon games or something. That would be kind of cool.
It also never came back. Like, she never like referenced like, oh, I remember when I was a kid, I tried to cheat and cheating's bad because Auntie told me so. Like, they never. It was just how do we get into the subject? Which I guess you need, but
I mean,
to
yeah,
me, it was like...
It was definitely a MacGuffin because it was,
it's a MacGuffin.
This is how we introduced the idea of the truth is what matters, and you're not special unless you do the right thing, and you're also amazing from when you were born because you can compete with all these women. So you needed it, but it wasn't the best way to do it.
Right, and along the lines of the MacGuffin, I also struggled with the Dreamstone. because as Mississippi River over here would say, it's a OMG science.
Oh yeah.
It changes realities for Barbara and Max, but for Diana, it's just a perception thing. Like, why does it change what it can do based on who it's encountering? Like, there's a dude at the end who's like, I want a farm. Boom. But Diana wants Steve, and he's like embodying this other dude. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, that makes zero sense. And even I forget the king or whatever he was that Lord is talking to, and he's like, I want my lands back, my ancestral land back. All of a sudden, this giant border wall appears out of nowhere, crushing things. So it was very real and very tangible.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dreamstone can't. I mean, the Dreamstone is enough that it can be a person, and he can take, health and wellness from other people when he does that to compensate for the effects on himself. But you can't just straight up bring someone back from the dead. It has to embody somebody who was in a coma. That was just stupid.
And even that, it's not even her perception. I'm sorry.
It's only hers.
It's just her perception. Right, because even the dude looks into the mirror and he doesn't see Chris Pine.
No, which doesn't make... So that's a bigger issue. Like, she struggled with the idea of wanting to keep him and spent several days with him.
Yeah.
But that guy had a life. Like, yeah, he was in a coma, but he had a life. Like, what would have happened if you had decided, you know what, this is worth it because I have my love back and whatever? You are essentially killing this person because it's, you've now taken over his identity and all of his past relationships, his job, his life beyond that.
That's my main issue with the entire film, and it's its own plot point here. And we sort of have to dive into it a little bit. Like, the moral and ethical concern of that body swapping, if it was gender swapped, the amount of backlash, let me tell you, I can confidently say that would have happened. If and this happens a lot with the film, right? Like, if you swap the genders, a lot of this stuff just does not get allowed. Now, I am not saying that from a chauvinistic male perspective who doesn't like female leads. I'm actually saying that as a feminist with 3 daughters and a wife who sees a director with a script taking cheap shots for validation when you didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I mean by that. There's so much that she leaves from a directorial standpoint. She leaves so much on the cutting room floor, and you could have risen above it. But instead of just making a good film, you felt like you needed to say something. And you needed to do that, and it was done so very poorly, at the expense of the story, at the expense of the characters, at the expense of the progression of those characters. And now, because you felt like you needed to make these cultural commentaries, we walk away with not a good film and a bad taste in our mouth when it comes to females in leads, as opposed to just saying, hey, let's make a good story. And if something needs to be said, let the audience intuit that instead of spoon feeding them this agenda-ridden script.
And the first one wasn't like that. It's like, because the first one was successful and people liked it, now we can use the second one to like push this weird message when Wonder Woman is such a empowering feminist character.
Exactly.
As is, like, you made it weird by taking these cheap shots.
Yeah, you made it weird. That's it. I don't know why she needed to be a museum curator. Like, there seems to be a lot of focus on that. She's not really hiding her identity. It's not like Superman. It's not even like, Batman. Like, she is who she is. But I think she thinks she needs a secret identity more than she actually does. And this is a full other conversation. The point of a secret identity is to protect those that you care about around you. She literally has no one.
Right. So who is... Right.
That's actually the point of the movie.
Who is she protecting in 60 some odd years since the first movie? You've never fallen in love again. You've never met anyone significant in your life. You only had
Right.
Steve and Etta Candy and, the other ragtag guys, and they're all dead now. So,
They're all dead. Are you really just trying to make sure that you can get a 401k and $50,000 a year?
but
Like, what are we
but what
doing?
doesn't make sense about the secret identity thing is the mall scene.
Right.
When she saves the little girl and is like, shh, don't tell anybody you see me, and then the newscaster is like, if reports are to be believed by the 150 people that just watched this go down, then some mysterious woman who works just down the road at the museum, it's not like when she's Wonder Woman she wears a mask.
Right.
And it's not like when she's Diana, she, even Superman's it and wears glasses or something.
It's also not like she's a stunningly beautiful person.
Right. So here's this
Like,
stunningly
come
beautiful
on.
superhero, and now here's this stunningly beautiful museum curator, but nobody's putting those puzzle pieces together. That seems ridiculous.
Yeah. We talked about Cheetah. The thing I thought that she was a solid second antagonist, but the thing that made me laugh was like, at the end when she's like, I want to be an apex predator.
Yeah, yeah.
Why did she become a cheetah and not an orca whale? Like, again, back to the Dreamstone, how does it determine what you then become? Like, I can imagine her becoming a narwhal. Like, oh, she really got her wish there.
Well, okay, so I feel like I'm defending this, and I don't mean to defend it entirely, but
But you have to.
there's an earlier scene when she admires Diana's shoes, which are leopard print or cheetah print, and when you see her mid transformation, she's wearing a cheetah print shirt and a cheetah print jacket. So it could be as simple as I want to be an apex predator, but maybe part of like the inner background character, she happens to like cheetahs, like they happen to be favorite animal or something like that. So maybe the Dreamstone just kind of, implied what she was inferring. And
Maybe.
I mean, again, I know that's kind of a leap, and that's something that you have to just make an assumption for. But yeah, there's a lot of apex predators.
Yeah. So the CGI, particularly at the battle at the end, is terrible. And I think that's why it's so dark, because they know it's terrible.
All the Wonder Woman CGI is pretty not good.
It's not great. We talked about the social commentary of a female-directed film. I feel like it's just not clever in the way that they're saying it. I don't disagree with what they're saying. I disagree with how they're saying it.
Great message, bad execution.
Yeah, like I know men are pigs, but to have all of that embodied in every time Diana walks down the street, some guy throwing himself on her, it's like, no, that's not, it's not based in reality, right? Like I get that these are super heightened messages, and we sort of we focus them into these characters, right? And we do that because it's a comic book,
right?
But like it just kept happening over and over again, where I was like, didn't you just say that? Oh, it's happening again? And again, I'm a male with not this experience, so I can't really comment on it. But I feel like if you're going to say it, make sure that it has a punch the first time you say it, so you don't have to say it again. And I just felt like it just kept, she kept ringing the bell, where it was like, yeah. And because of that, because of a lot of that social commentary that she threw in there, I felt like it dragged a lot. There was a lot of moments in between big action sequences where you sort of forgot, oh, that's right, this is a superhero movie.
You know what? One of those that I thought didn't work is when so early on there's the drunk guy in the park who seems to be ready to attack Barbara,
Right.
and Diana saves her by knocking the guy and injuring him. I feel like that because they had her do that, it's gratuitous to have Barbara do it later when she started getting her powers. It should have either been that nothing happens, or she's able to accidentally fight him off the first time and then she's able to beat him up the second time. But I feel like it's a little gratuitous to be like, here's our first strong female lead. who knocks this guy out. And now our second female strong lead knocks the guy out again, just a little more viciously.
Yep.
It just seems like the message got a little muddy there. Great message,
Totally.
but a little muddy.
Another muddy thing is that Steve in this guy's body can just fly a plane that's 50 years updated because planes are planes.
Yeah.
No. So here's something that bothers me. And you can disagree with me on this. Every time Diana realizes something from her past, or that she's facing evil, or that it's from the gods, she becomes so incredibly emotional about it.
Yeah.
It's like, why every time you realize that something is connected to you and your past, you instantaneously cry? Why is that? It just gets annoying.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. I
right?
I don't know.
It does happen. It happens a lot. The everyone renounce your wish. Well, what happens if I wish to be cured from cancer? Stupid.
Also, how many people are actually? That's one of my bad too. Is
Right, how many people
are actually going to do that? You said a convincing, like they have a terrorist who had wished for more nukes, who renounces. You telling me he's going to renounce his wish because things got a little scary? Come on.
Oh, Diana told him to, so he did.
She implored with them to, but it seems ridiculous.
She emotionally compelled them.
It seems like such a ridiculous thing that in order for this to stop, everyone has to renounce their wish, and everyone does. Come on, give me a break.
Yep, I'm with you. Last thing I have, I didn't like how we got everything shoved into one movie concerning her powers, her skills, her toys. Everything is in here. The lasso, the fight, the jet, the armor, the invisibility, the fact that she can fly. Like, all of it got shoved in, and it doesn't really serve a purpose. It was as though they knew they were never going to make a third one, so they have to quick showcase everything that Wonder Woman can do. Yes, it's a wink and a nod to the fans, but it didn't really serve a purpose. Whereas, like, and the reason it didn't serve a purpose is because getting to the very end was like, oh, quick, she's going to use the armor to defeat Cheetah. Well, the armor was a throwaway comment in the middle of the film that I barely remembered you made. The fact that the plane needs to become invisible is a practical reason so you can get away from a bad guy, but that's not the point. And all of a sudden she's doing Doctor Strange voodoo? Like, it just makes no sense, and all you wanted to do was just get every power skill set in there, but it doesn't work.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, the armor was a big issue for me, one, because it looks ridiculous, and two, because they said, okay, so, what was her name? Asteria?
Yeah. Whatever.
Well, whatever it was, the legend who the armor was created for, it was made of all the Amazon's armor so that she could fight battles on her own. So it was built to withstand armies, but during the fight with Cheetah, she's ripping through it pretty easily, it seems. Now, I know that she's got, super strength and super claws and whatever now, but so do all the Amazons. The Amazons are all fierce, super strong warriors. So you're telling me that this was able to withstand, a several hundred person strong army, but not one person with cat powers?
Also, in theory, this takes place after Justice League?
No.
Oh, no, it's the 80s.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
it's before Justice League.
Okay, so why didn't she have that armor during Justice League? You're literally fighting Darkseid.
How dare you? For those of you in the know, that's a reference to way back when Joey didn't know how to pronounce Darkseid's name, and then intentionally
when
did
Joey
it just
intentionally
to piss me off.
So, successfully, though.
Oh, very successfully. You're absolutely right. Very successfully.
Krispy Kreme, what else do you have as far as bad stuff?
Well, you covered a lot of my stuff. So a lot of the things that I have are a little more nitpicky things for the most part. The mall scene as a whole didn't work for me, but the one robber jumped to threatening the life of a kid pretty quickly. Like you went
Yeah, and
from
everybody
robbing
else
a
is like,
store
what is
to
going on?
to about to throw a kid off the balcony. That was a real fast, real extreme leap that I just was like, that seems, again, just kind of a MacGuffin that you needed to, you know, have her save the kids so you could do this scene. But that seemed completely ridiculous. It was too long. The whole movie was too long. It
100%.
it was 2.5 hours. Did not need to be. Hour 40 would have been fine. You could have
45 minutes would have been cool.
could have cut a bunch of that stuff out.
Yep.
There was a trope of, as much as I thought Kristen Wiig did well, and this wasn't her fault. It was the trope of a sad person becomes the villain.
Right, because she's ignored and doesn't do well at her job. It's like I have worked with plenty of people like that, never developed powers.
And it feels like it's such a rehashed thing. It happened to Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It happened to Eddie Brock in Spider-Man 3. It happened to
It's Iron Man 3.
it's just all these, like, I'm sad, I'm not getting what I want. Now I have a taste of power and I jump to being a villain.
Actually, now that you point that out, it doesn't work even more so because those people in the movies that you point out actually had interactions with our hero and were dismissed or ignored
By the hero.
Diana goes out of her way to connect with her.
Right, they became like best friends.
No.
And so, yeah, there's a whole nother reason that it doesn't work. When we were talking about the CG, the lasso swinging looked ridiculous.
Oh, the lightning? Yeah.
When she would whip it and then just float, it just felt like CGI has come way too far for that to be. Yeah, it's come way too far for that to be.
The equivalent would be like if Thor was jumping from lightning bolt to lightning bolt, and we'd all go, "That was stupid."
Yeah,
but she gets to do it, and it's like, and that's an interesting point where it's like the cheapness of some of the things that they did. Had you gender swapped, you would have been like, "That's dumb," but that was an intentional call. That what you thought? Oh, we'll just give you a pass because it's her or it's a woman. It's like you just wouldn't have done that.
My last thing is a plot issue that doesn't make sense. Well, my last two things. One, I didn't care for Pedro Pascal in this. Now, I think he's great in most things he does, but I did not like him as Maxwell Lord. And part of that might have been the way that Lord was written, because he's supposed to be, he's supposed to be the Norman Osborn or the Lex Luthor.
His role was good, but it could be better.
Yes, exactly. It could be better. It could be much, much better.
Be.
Maxwell Lord is so evil that Wonder Woman straight up kills him in the comics.
Yeah.
She twists his head around.
Forgot about
and
that.
There's a lot of fallout from that. So I just feel like it was not done well. I didn't like him as him.
They looked into the comic book canon and was like, oh, there's a name. He's our bad guy.
There's a name and he's a businessman. That's perfect.
Yeah, but they didn't really have a strong motivation. The connection between the two of them is really not that strong. People start making wishes. Okay, now Diana's got to get involved. It just, none of it really, back to your thing. It was OMG science.
It was definitely OMG science, but here's my biggest OMG science issue. So when you first are introduced to the Dreamstone, you have to touch it to make your wish. Right. Then when he becomes the Dreamstone, you have to touch him to make your wish.
Sure.
How is he able to grant all these wishes using the cameras? No one is touching him.
It's the ability of the computers in the 80s. They can do anything.
So they can...
Again, Superman 3. Do you remember when it was like, oh, yeah, if we just build this computer, because no one will ever use a computer in the future, it can do anything we need it to because it's the 80s and we're stupid.
But you know what? That's OMG science. This is OMG, this is bad writing, because it just...
100%.
Like, you took a major aspect of him constantly grabbing people's hands or grabbing people, around the shoulders and doing the wishing thing. That was an interesting aspect of it, is like, oh, what if he can't touch somebody and do that? Like, it seems so aggressive and forceful that all of a sudden he just walks around going, granted, granted, and I'll take your this and I'll take your that and whatever.
What would
It
have
was
been
just like,
cool,
why doesn't he need to do that all of a sudden?
just to rewrite it from a writer's perspective, what would have been cool is if there was a showdown between Maxwell and Diana, right? And for some reason, she can't touch him. Very similar to how he set it up. But there's no computers and there's no satellites and there's no nothing. There's just a crowd in the mall. And all of a sudden now everybody who is touching him starts getting all these wishes granted, but they actually become the barrier for her to get to him. And now he just keeps touching people and left, right, and center. It's like, well, I can't get to him because all of these wishes, you need to renounce it. But now all of these barriers are coming in and she's seeing the value of these wishes on the people. But what they did was they disconnected the humanity and the impact of what these wishes actually brought to these people and just made it satellites. Whereas that would have been a great motivator for her to be like, look, like her crying and saying, I have to renounce my wish. I don't get Steve. Okay. But now you have to do that with everyone. That would have been powerful.
That would have been much better. And I think that
hire me, DC.
That should be the director's cut, the new director's cut.
The Monteleone version.
But the problem with why he was, if you wanted to just say he didn't always need to touch people, he was just doing it one-on-one. All right, fine. That seems dumb, but fine.
Sure.
But there's a whole scene where he's talking to the televangelist and he's like, how can I touch a lot of people at once? Because this is what you do for a living. How do I do that?
That's the hinge moment. That's the hinge moment where it was a physical touch, but now it turns into a spiritual, emotional, non-tangible touch.
But they don't fully make the...
Oh, of course not.
They don't explain it. So it just is like, so you don't have to touch people then? So all this, you were wasting time meeting with all these people now when you could have just like over the phone been like, oh, you want this? I want this in return. Done.
They don't explain why she's stupidly staring at a red star balloon at the end, but we got that.
Because it's Christmas.
And it's her star.
It's a Christmas movie now.
Right. In the last 5 minutes. Because it came out in December.
I completely forgot that that there was a Christmas scene. So to me now it'll have to be
Chris actually texted me and he's
watch.
Like, oh, we should have done this at Christmas time. And I said, we should not desecrate Christmas with this movie.
Yeah, no, that's fair. There's plenty of other Christmas movies we could do.
Chris, what kind of spiritual stuff did you get out of this movie?
Well, it might seem like the easy way in, but, they said a lot of times there was a lot of stuff about the truth. So there's a lot of things about the truth in the beginning and towards the end, that the truth is enough. The truth is beautiful. Diana uses the lasso, explains to Steve that the lasso doesn't only make you tell the truth, but it also makes you see the truth. And she does that to Maxwell Lord at the end. She makes him see the truth about his son. And I feel like the truth is what brings genuine fulfillment in life. We can see, there's the verse that says, what good is it to gain the whole world if it costs you your soul? And that's what was happening to a lot of these people. That's what happened to Cheetah. She gained these incredible abilities, but she lost the thing that made her her. She lost that compassion, that kindness, that humility that was part of who she was. So was it worth gaining all these things but losing who you are? For us as believers in Christ, the truth of what Jesus did and the truth of who he is has to be enough for us to make the right decisions. It can't be trying to make a decision and then fit it into what you think, God's plan is. You know what I mean?
Right. And he says, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And he then goes on to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Exactly.
And in him we find that, and we also find the freedom from needing to hide.
So for me, the truth being enough to me says that, okay, so if I believe that Jesus is the truth and that what he did and who he says he is the truth, that needs to be enough. Because what good is it to gain more than what he provides if it costs me who I am, if it costs me my soul? What good is that? So I loved that idea, and I loved that was reiterated so many times, is that the truth is all we really have. When it boils down, all we have is the truth that we live. And we live in a society today where there's your truth and my truth and his truth and her truth. Jesus is the truth, and that needs to be enough for us.
It's great. I love that. Mine was, again, I love Marvel films, but DC always gives me something incredibly thought-provoking. And that's, in this film, it's what's the difference between wishing and praying? Max is talking to that televangelist, like you had mentioned before, and then he asks them to shift their vernacular from praying to wishing. And I really thought, like, what is the difference there? And as I'm thinking and journaling a little bit about it, prayer is rooted in a relationship. It is about aligning our wants to God's heart. Whereas when we're wishing about something, it's about what we want, and that's not aligned to anything beyond that. It's just selfish. And that's not a malignant term. It's about the self.
Right. It's not even like you're wishing for something bad, but it's about what you want. Even if it's, like you said, what if I wish to be cured from cancer? It's just what you want. Sure. So it's a self-interest.
Exactly. And prayer is more about submitting, whereas wishing is about obtaining specific outcomes. And I think wishing and praying for us really are about outcomes. If we speak desire in a direction, we sort of feel control, but prayer isn't about an outcome, right? So like if we're wishing for something, we say, okay, I wish that I had this, and there's a destination that we're aiming for. Whereas prayer is more a conversation, and it's like, I don't have the outcome here, but I know you do. And so what you're doing is developing a relationship with a person, whereas wishing something is about getting what I need. And it really is focused on what the individual needs. There was this verse in 1 John 5:14. It says, this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And that really spoke a lot to me, in that when we wish something, we're really hoping that we get it. But when we're praying something, it's about the acknowledgement that we're heard. I think a lot of people, I struggle with this, particularly as a pastor, but also personally. Like, I struggle with people praying and not getting what they want, whereas I feel like the invitation for prayer a lot of times is just knowing that we're heard, to know that God is listening, to know that he hears us, to know that he cares and that he loves us. And so when we're praying, it's less about wishing and hoping for an outcome, but it's more about submitting ourselves to God's will for our lives, developing that relationship, and then giving him the outcome.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes we look at prayer as wishing because we pray for, even when we pray for something genuine and we pray for healing, we pray for a problem to be solved, we pray for, financial provision or relationship healing, or, to get this new job, to get this new thing, and I'm not saying you can't pray for those things, but you need to be ready for it to not be the same as a wish.
Absolutely.
If that's what ends up being the answer there. Yeah.
Right. And being flexible for however he answers. And just being transparent, that's incredibly unsatisfying at times.
Yeah.
But if the goal is an outcome, then yeah, it's going to be upsetting and unsatisfying. But if the goal is relationship development, surrender of my cares and putting them on him because he cares for me, and knowing that he hears me,
Mhm.
well, then that's 10 out of 10 every time.
Absolutely. You know what's not 10 out of 10 is this movie. So
It's true.
why don't we jump into rating it and seeing
Yep.
what we think. Do you want me to drop or do you want to drop first?
I'll go first because I think you're going to rate it higher than I will. For me, this is an Adam West. I don't know what the word is.
Instinctively.
I instinctively wanted to give it a Clooney because I remember it being so bad the first time I watched it. But then again, I put on the lens of Superman and said this is a unique approach with classic superhero tropes. It's nothing really good. There's plenty of problems with it. There's some fun aspects to it. It is understandable given the time it came out. What is not acceptable is some of the overcompensation for good writing. It's a bad film, but as a superhero film goes, it's a product of its time that we'll look back and be like, yeah, that was fun. And so, when we give something an Adam West, it's so bad, it's good. I'm not even going to say it's good. It's okay. But if you don't have that lens, then yeah, it's terrible. So for me, it's an Adam West.
All right. I mean, I think that's fair, but to me, so bad it's good implies rewatchability. For me, it does not have rewatchability. I saw it when it first came out, and I remember liking it more than I did the second time. And this is one of a very small list of comic book movies that I've not watched multiple times. And unless I'm introducing my son to all of the DC movies, or for whatever reason I'm doing a full rewatch of the DCEU, I'm not gonna watch this again. I love the 80s. I love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Excuse me. It's got a great cast, but there were too many problems. It was too long. It was kind of boring. It just I can't donate another 2.5 hours to it. So for me, it's a Kilmer. It's completely forgettable. I'm not even gonna think about it after I was only thinking about it the last couple of days because we were coming into this. And so I wanted to have all my notes ready and all my spiritual stuff ready and all that. But even having watched it again, if I was just watching it again for fun or to revisit it, I wouldn't have thought about it again after it was over. And now that this episode has been released and is out there in the world, the only time I'll think about it again is if I, come back and watch our old episodes. So it's
Fair
completely
enough.
Kilmer, completely forgettable. You may have to remind me that it exists in the future.
I may have to remind you that we even covered it.
In the future, when we're picking new movies. You want to do a Wonder Woman movie? Yeah, wasn't there two of
No.
them? Did we do one of those already?
There's 4 of them, technically. There's the solo movies, and then she shows up in Batman versus Superman.
Right. Well, there's
And she's in the Justice
technically
League.
5 because there's 2 versions of Justice League. So she was in,
True.
and she's in the Flash. So she's in 6.
Oh, right.
So she
Right.
makes an appearance in 6 movies, but only 2 of them are about her.
If she had a contract for only 2 films and she got into 6,
Well, she had a contract for
That would make
2
her-
films about her.
that would make her a cheetah.
Oh my god.
But what did you think, audience? Did you like this movie? Can you call it a movie? Would you watch it again? Let's save you the time.
You don't need to. But if you do feel the need to rewatch it, it is streaming on HBO Max, so you can watch it if you have access to that platform. So it's available for you if you so desire.
You can rent it from Palmer Video.
Palmer Video, like Ray Palmer? The Atom?
That was the one around the corner from mine. It was Palmer Video, and then it was West Coast Video.
Oh, yeah, I remember West Coast.
That definitely existed.
Growing up around my grandmother's house, it was Joe's Video.
Nice.
But because it was VHS tapes, to look for a movie, he would print a print and laminate just a picture of the front cover of the VHS, and you
Yep.
like finger scrolled through them like records, or like boarded
That's
comic
cool.
books, and then you would give
Yep.
him the laminated picture, and then he'd give you the
Because
corresponding
they were all
movie.
in the back.
Because the records
Right.
are all in the back. Because if you had laid out all the VHS he had, it would have been no room. And then of course there was the black curtain with all the no movies in it.
Yeah, but then all you had to do was grab one and walk out the door. There's no security.
Well, yeah, there was that too. You could just walk away with it, and VHS back then were expensive to just buy them.
You mean I could watch Milo and Otis whenever I wanted to because it's in my pocket?
Whenever you want, you lucky dog.
You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at The Sanctum Pod or The Sanctum Podcast. We greatly appreciate the community that's being developed here. Thank you so much for your comments, kind words, and snarky likes, because there's a couple of you, and you know who you are.
Snarky retorts.
Yeah, no, the retorts are great. But again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sanctum Sanctorum Podcast.
Yes, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. And remember, kids, life is good, but it can be better if you like, follow, and subscribe.
Or else you'll turn into an apex predator.
You should be so lucky.
You know what also bothered me? I didn't talk about this, but why is she so triggered every time the phrase, "I wish we had more time," comes up? It's like a pretty generic phrase.
Well, because they say that a lot in the first movie.
Right, but are you just walking through like Dairy Queen and somebody realizes they're late, they check their watch and go, "I wish I had more time," and then she's just sobbing in a pool on the floor?
What happened? My boyfriend died 66 years ago. Oh, all right.